Hey everyone, welcome to Fight Club. I'm your host, Robert Durden. We're going to go over a couple of things tonight with a short show, probably about 20 to 30 minutes. First, the rules. Rule number 1, talk about Fight Club. Rule number 2, pick your battles, know your shit. Rule number 3, know your opponent. Rule number 4, keep the debate on topic. Rule number 5, admit when you're wrong. So, real quickly, I'm going to get this out of the way. I don't always follow my own rules when I'm going after people on Twitter. These are more my rules for if you're actually talking to someone on the street or a friend of yours, if you have a healthy debate. I'm not always going to give Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi the same type of leeway I would somebody who I know is coming into the conversation honestly, and I don't even honestly think those people are human. They're more or less psychopaths. So before you guys call me hypocrites, let's just get that out of the way. I don't always follow my own rules when, going after celebrities or politicians on Twitter. So let's just, before you call me hypocrite, let's just get that out of the way real quick. So today we're going to be talking about impeachment and Trump's lack of indictment, which is hilarious to watch the neolibs freak out as if it's super surprising. If you know anything about politics, you know this was obvious, and in fact I was talking about it weeks ago. We'll talk a little bit about why the 2K stimulus checks failed, and even though they seem like they're a political slam dunk, why the Democrats can't seem to get that done. We're going to break that down a little bit here. It's so easy. Why aren't they doing anything? It's like a 70-30 issue, 80-20 issue now. Like, how come we can't get stimulus checks quickly? And then we're going to talk a little bit about universal basic income, and that's going to be the main portion of this show. I have a debate coming up with one of Ian's friends named Ben. He is going to be arguing for capitalism. I'm going to be defending socialism or eco-socialism. And I'm doing my research, and I stumbled across an old article that I read about UBI a couple of years back, and I did some notes on it today, reread it. It's a great article. It's on Vox. I'll send you guys the actual link below. And we'll go over the two worst arguments against UBI that I expect will possibly be used against me when I'm debating Ben. So let's talk impeachment. This I'm not going to spend too much time on. It is absolutely hysterical to watch neolibs freak the fuck out as if they expected this was going to go well for them. Now, I don't think the neoliberal politicians expected Trump to actually get impeached. I think they're smart enough to know that this was more or less like a distraction, and that in the end they weren't going to do anything. They weren't going to be able to get the 67 votes in the Senate. It's absurd. They know the rules, how that works. They knew that they weren't going to be able to impeach him with the 67 votes. You needed 2/3 majority to impeach in the Senate. But the people that aren't in politics, that are just random people who are centrist, are freaking out. It's bananas how they thought that he was going to actually get impeached. They didn't, in fact, use the 14th Amendment or Article 14, to make sure he can't run again. So essentially this was all just theater, political theater. And it's frustrating because my theory is that they were using this the entire time to just distract from Medicare for All and the stimulus checks. If you guys remember correctly, about 7 weeks ago, maybe around Christmas and New Year's, there was a tremendous amount of outside pressure for stimulus checks and Medicare for All. Medicare for All first, and then once the floor vote kind of died, it was stimulus checks. And it was tremendous. It was looking like we actually were going to get some of these things done because of all the outside pressure we had. And then everything just kind of died because then we had the Capitol riot, and then subsequent Twitter ban of Trump, and then we had the impeachment process. So I think this whole thing was more or less a distraction. Democrats ran with it because it takes pressure off of them for doing a very poor job getting stimulus out to people. And to say poor, that's being kind. They've been absolutely shitty. So I think that it was convenient that the Capitol riot came along. So now they have something to focus on. They can't walk and chew bubble gum at the same time, so they focus on impeachment and ride it out for 6 or 7 weeks until people forget. And all that organic energy that we had behind Medicare for All And the stimulus checks, the 2K stimulus checks, that's gone. That's never coming back, guys, never. So just expect that they're going to use impeachment in the future whenever they're close to having to give something up, because people will just immediately in this country easily distracted. They'll just focus on impeachment for a couple of weeks, the steam will cool off, and then suddenly they don't have to actually deliver on $2,000 checks anymore. So what are they going to do now that Trump's gone, that he isn't indicted? I don't know. They need a boogeyman. I saw that CNN's ratings dropped something like 30 or 40% after Trump got out of office, because all they do is talk about him. So what are they going to do now? I've seen people speculating that they might try to like demonize QAnon. They don't have to demonize QAnon, but they might focus on QAnon and the culture war heavily over the next couple of years until the midterms come up, and try to ride the culture war, which is the dumbest shit I can possibly imagine. But of course, it keeps them from having to actually do anything. You know, they don't have to actually pass legislation that helps people during the pandemic or during the Depression. They can just demonize people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a goofball and obviously the easiest target on the planet, and just act like there's this huge race war or this huge racial uprising coming right now, and there's all these crazy right-wing extremists, which there are. I'm not downplaying that at all, but that's going to be their entire thing. They're going to take Trump bad and repackage it into QAnon bad, Marjorie Taylor Greene bad, and just demonize the living shit out of the right the entire time, act like there's 50% psychos in the entire country, when that's a very marginal part of society. And that's a horrible recipe for disaster in the 2022 midterms. It will not work. I want to talk about the 2K stimulus checks now and why the fuck they're taking so long to get out. So there's a lot of misinformation going on, a lot of gaslighting. And gaslighting is when people will try to convince you that it's not so easy as simply using budget reconciliation to get these things passed. Or it's not so easy or so simple as to use a skinny bill to pass $2,000 stimulus checks, when it really is that easy. That's what gaslighting is. They try to make you think that you don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about the logistics of getting something done. And that's been going on like crazy lately. The truth of the matter is, we can absolutely get 2K stimulus checks via an executive order, or Joe Biden can do it, pass a skinny bill, excuse me. And if he passed a skinny bill, which is just not an omnibus bill, it has just that one thing in it, just 2K stimulus checks, it would pass easily, because no one's going to vote against that. But they won't do that. They could also do it through budget reconciliation, which is what I recommended and what Bernie Sanders is trying to do. And a lot of people are trying to say, well, you know, you might be able to get the stimulus checks passed through budget reconciliation, but there are certain other things you can't, like the minimum wage cannot go up to $15 an hour in that same bill. That's untrue. You have to challenge the Byrd rule, which decides what constitutes being able to be considered in budget reconciliation. But they absolutely can. The Democrats can absolutely challenge the Byrd rule and get minimum wage put into a bill like that too. And they can pass both of those things via budget reconciliation easily. So why don't they do it? Well, the first thing is they know there's suckers out there that are going to go out and gaslight you on it. They know that they have coverage. They know that they can go run a pick and roll because someone's always setting the fucking pick for them. Always gaslighting everybody on this stuff. It's absolutely as easy as that. If you use budget reconciliation, you need a 50-50 vote in the Senate. Simple majority with Kamala Harris as the tiebreaker. She will absolutely vote correct. You get Joe Manchin to vote correct, or if he won't do it, you drag him on social media and you get Hawley or Rubio. And they were both, Hawley especially, was on Bernie's side for stimulus, and Rubio is on the record as saying that he wants $2,000 stimulus as well. So if Joe Manchin doesn't want to do it, just embarrass the living shit out of him, get one Republican to vote for it, it'll still pass via budget reconciliation. So anybody that's telling you that you can't get a minimum wage increase and a stimulus via budget reconciliation right now, or at least a stimulus via a skinny bill, I mean, hell, you could do a skinny bill with a minimum wage and stimulus if you wanted to, but Joe Biden's never going to do that. They're lying to you. They're gaslighting you. So they're doubling down, the Democrats are, rather than doing a good job on delivering for things that'll help people materially during the pandemic and the subsequent depression, they're doubling down on QAnon and Marjorie Taylor Greene and neo-Nazis. So this is why, guys, I started this show. We cannot be fighting the culture war right now. We have to focus on the class war first. And that's why I'm willing to talk to almost anybody on this show, so long as I know they're going to talk to me in good faith. I am up for having any conversation you guys want to have, regardless of where you think you are in the political spectrum. This is the time we need to start having legit, cordial conversations. It's a class war, not a culture war. We need to remember that it's us versus them, and that them is the rich, the elite, the people who really pull all the strings and are trying to make us fight the culture war. We can fight that later. Let's take the rich out first. And this is why, of course, the Democrats are going to lose in 2022. If they keep fighting just the QAnon battle and that's all they've got, they're going to do Trump bad until 2022, but say QAnon in place of Trump, they're going to get shellacked in the House in 2022. Just expect it. And it's because they don't want to do anything good for people. You get people stimulus. I mean, if you just got people stimulus and a $14 minimum wage, you probably get it. $15 minimum wage and recurring stimulus, you clean house in 2022. But they're not going to do that, even though it would be easy. Lastly, I'd like to talk about UBI. And like I said, I was getting prepared for a debate that I'm having probably in about a week and a half here. And I'm defending socialism against somebody who's a pure capitalist. And I know that one of the things capitalists like to bring up against socialism is that a lot of times socialist countries will have like a UBI or extremely high minimum wages, or a ton of unionization, which forces wages to be high. So I knew I was going to have to defend UBI, and I looked up an old article that I saw a couple of years back. I think it was published in 2017, and I saw it in 2018. And it basically debunks the two biggest arguments that are always used against universal basic income. Right now is the time for universal basic income. I want to push it heavily, because if not now, when? Probably not in my lifetime, maybe ever in the United States. But we have a pandemic and a Great Depression. Right now would be the great time to actually implement this. It would be the only way that you're going to get the millennials back on track. I don't know anybody that's in their mid-30s, pushing 40, that's going to be able to get themselves back on their feet after being wiped out by 2 depressions in their life. Anybody that's lost everything in the millennial generation that's now in their 30s, I don't think they're going to want to start over again. I don't think they trust the system. I don't trust the system, and I'm a doctor, and I have no money saved. I'm out of work now because of COVID, and I've been wiped out twice by 2 different recessions. So I don't think that we're going to be able to get out of this hole unless we have a UBI, and I think right now is the time to push for it. The 2 arguments that are always used against it, and they're always in this order. UBI de-incentivizes work, meaning if you give people money, they quit their jobs. And the second one is the cost argument, in that even if it didn't de-incentivize work, if we did it, it just simply cost too much to lift people out of poverty to the level that it would even make sense doing it. Both of these are false, and the article is great in Vox. It tears them both apart pretty thoroughly, but I'm going to break that down a little bit for you. This is how I would argue against it, but now I actually have some data. So the first thing, the de-incentivization of work, this has been debunked for years. And in the article, they cite what's called a meta-analysis. And a meta-analysis is the gold standard of studies. Since I'm in medicine and scientific in nature, I like meta-analyses because meta-analyses collect all the available data from all the other sources that are available, and then compile it all together and try to average it and try to draw conclusions. So it is the most comprehensive type of study. And this was, I don't think it collected every available piece of data, but it was very, very comprehensive. It was an examination of multiple other studies instead of being an individual study. So that's highly reliable. Said that UBI does not de-incentivize work. It will, at best, make people drop down from having too many hours at work down to full-time, or someone will maybe drop from full-time down to part-time. They found one study where there was an actual drop in people working in the workforce, and it was called the Seattle-Denver experiment. It dropped about 4% in that experiment, but then they went on to say that a lot of the people, and this makes sense with Denver and Seattle, a lot of those people, what they did is they dropped out of the workforce and started to work gigs at home, artists at home, and they started making cash money that didn't actually show up with the IRS, and they were using IRS data. So when they said that it dropped 4%, it was just like, well, the IRS says so. Well, of course, a lot of those people now are working under the table. So they didn't quit working. They just stopped going to a job where they had to file for taxes. So there is no data that suggests that it de-incentivizes people from working. And I've seen other studies where, and these are anecdotal, not really anecdotal, but standalone studies, where they will grab a bunch of homeless people or very, very impoverished people and then give them $1,000 a month for a certain amount of months, and then see if they go get a job, if they get their life underway, if they get housing, and how they are doing like 6 months to a year after you start giving them $1,000 a month. And they find out that like between 60 and 90% of people not only go get a job, but they go out and like completely correct their lives. Almost none of them take the money and stop, like don't do anything well with their lives. Like they actually get their life underway. So the question is not whether or not it de-incentivizes work. The question is just how much do we need to give people to get their lives back in order, to actually make sure that no one falls, or very few people can ever fall into the kind of gross poverty that we have in this country. So that was from the study. The person that studied it works at the University of Chicago, and I think it's called the Roosevelt Center, or the Roosevelt Foundation is where the study was done. And then the second point is the cost argument, where they say that it's just simply too costly to give people a UBI. That's not true. The study I'm going to cite for this one is from University of Michigan, and it's great. It's in the article that I'm going to post, so just look at it if you want to. And it talks about if you wanted to do a universal basic income in the United States based off of where our poverty line is. So let's say you wanted to do something like a $2,000 a month UBI, and our poverty line is, I don't know, we draw it at something like 30,000 or 26,000 or something like that, that you can get the UBI in full up until you make upwards of 50% beyond where the poverty line is drawn in the country. So if it is something like 30,000, then you would have to make above 45,000 before you would opt out, or before your UBI would start to reduce itself slowly. And if you were to do it like this, the University of Michigan study stated that you could actually eliminate poverty in the U.S. entirely with about $219 billion a year. That's nothing. Our military budget is $770,000, or $770 billion a year, excuse me. So this is a fraction of our military budget. So it absolutely can be done exactly that way. Now that's a means-tested way. I'd rather just do it universally, but if you are in favor of austerity, they calculated that you could basically eliminate poverty 100% in the United States if you were to do it like that, and it would cost $219 billion. It's a very comprehensive study, and they do more than that. Like they also calculated how much it would cost to eliminate 75% of poverty, or 125% of poverty, which I don't know why you won't want to, how is that possible? But basically, what the number we're looking at is about $200 billion, $219 billion a year, and you could eliminate poverty via a UBI. And of course, for all you capitalists out there, and the argument I will make is, to the person I'm debating, is that of course gets so many people off the social safety net. If you're about austerity, a UBI is a great solution. Now I'm for having a social safety net and a UBI, but an argument I will use in favor of a UBI to people that care about austerity and making sure people don't end up on the social safety net is UBI solves that problem. So to end the episode today, I'd like to have a little bit of fun. Now that we know that the numbers around UBI, I'd like to go over the top 7 ways that we could immediately pay for UBI right now the way that I just described it. Number 1 way just tax Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos 50% of their wealth, or 100% of their wealth that they've accumulated since the pandemic started. That equals about $220 billion, and everybody gets a UBI. 2, you could cut the military budget by 25%. Like I said, it's like $770 billion a year. This costs $219. It's roughly like 26%, 27% of our military budget. Cut it by a quarter, you can pay for the UBI that I just talked about. Number 3, Bernie's wealth tax, the stratified wealth tax that he was running on, would produce something like $300 or $400 billion a year. So don't quote me exactly how much, but it's far more than the $219 billion that we would need. Just the wealth tax alone could do that. You could, number 4, increase the top marginal tax rate, the corporate tax rate, the capital gains rate, and we could do any number of different ways, but I would just tweak those 3, and you're going to get some money from the rich that will be able to actually pay for the UBI. And number 5, pass a law, and this will never happen, but I would love to see it happen. Pass a law repatriating all of the offshore accounts that all these Wall Streeters and CEOs and bankers have been hiding in offshore 0% tax havens, and repatriate it and tax it all. I'm not sure how much that could create, but I've seen that there's like trillions offshore. So if you would just repatriate it for the normal, income tax, 25 to 35%, that's way more than we would need to pay for UBI. Number 6, just take all of Elon Musk's money. That's it. Just take his money. Like, leave Elon Musk with $1 billion, and you have more than $219 billion. So he could still be a billionaire. We can take his money, and everybody gets UBI for the year. Everybody. And then next year, we can do it to Bezos. And after that, we can do it to, let's see here, it would be like the Waltons. And then we can just go down the line. Everybody gets UBI, and they can all still be billionaires. And then number 7, this is the one that I would love to see. It's the easiest one, I think, other than maybe cutting the military budget. But in America, you'll never be able to get support for that, at least not to cut it enough. And the last one here, number 7, is just a 1% tax on Wall Street speculation would probably do it. A 0.1% tax on Wall Street regulation raises the 25 to 30 billion needed to pay for public college. That's how Bernie was going to pay for his public college. So a 1%, I would assume, would do the 250 to 300 billion that you need, and actually be more. It could be less than 1% tax on Wall Street speculation, and you could have a UBI for everybody. So don't let anybody gaslight you and tell you don't know how these things are done, or that these things cannot be done. We absolutely could have 2K stim checks. We absolutely could have recurring 2K stim checks, and it can be paid for, and it would not de-incentivize work whatsoever. You need to break that ideology that America has propagandized you with. We can pay for a lot of these things fairly easily by taxing the rich. So don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Keep fighting the good fight out there. I'll have another episode with Ian out soon. He wasn't able to come over due to a snowstorm last time, so he'll be over tomorrow. I imagine we will get the episode out within a day or two after that. And other than that, guys, have a good evening. I'll be doing another show myself tomorrow. Have a good one.